Hey everybody! I lost track of the timer counting down when the music stopped. I was like in the wrong tab. How's it going? I hope you're all doing well. Today I've got Andy Huneycutt with me, and we're going to do a live stream as long as it takes here to talk about webinars and answer any questions that you guys have had about Microsoft Teams webinars. Do a couple demos, talk about a couple of things that have come out recently that are brand new, even since my video, the beginning of last week, I think, is whenever I published that. So already 2 or 3 things have come out since then. And we'll just kind of see where you, the audience, wants to take this. So feel free in the chat to drop a question, drop a comment. I'm going to put up a chat overlay. So let me know where you guys are watching from. I'd be really interested to see where across the globe you're watching, so that it kind of helps us, pick what time to go live and all of that. So without further ado, I want to introduce Andy. And Andy, say hi and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. Andy Huneycutt. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I've interacted with many of you through the social media world. I'm really active on Twitter. But I'm really stoked to be here today to talk about webinars. I've been kind of bugging John for the last couple of weeks. I'm like, let's do something on webinars, and came together to do this live event. So I'm actually really looking forward to it, because I'm a technical trainer for Microsoft 365 technologies, and I've been doing the hybrid workplace for over 10 years now. So I've actually worked with like every webinar technology that there is, from WebEx to GoToWebinar to Zoom, and even using like the Microsoft Teams meetings and live events to deliver webinars. So I'm actually really about this, because this is something that we use for technical training all the time. So to be able to do a deep dive into it and answer some of the questions, for me, it's just really cool. But I'm really excited to see the technology roll out, because now I can do a lot of what I've been doing with other technologies and keep it inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, and hopefully minimize some of the friction between different systems and different tools, and keep things kind of in that one ecosystem. So this is really exciting.
Awesome. Well, you've definitely got a lot more experience than I do with different webinar platforms. My experience is I'm an IT guy for a large organization. We have a lot of people who do webinars, and we've got teams who are dedicated to supporting the webinar technology. But as part of my duties with Office 365 is to squeeze as much value out of that Microsoft 365 investment. We go around and try to see what can we get rid of in favor of Microsoft. How can we get those efficiencies that you mentioned of getting it all into one platform. So when webinars were announced, we started identifying all those people who do webinars, and folks who do GoToWebinar or WebEx or those different platforms, and gather their feedback as they see previews of Teams webinars, provide that back to Microsoft, and then hopefully get to where we can switch over to the Microsoft platform. So looking at the chat here, it looks like we got somebody from Charlotte here as well. So that's really cool. Welcome, and thanks for joining us at 11 o'clock your time over there. We got
totally shameless plug, but if you're in the Charlotte area, look up the Charlotte area SharePoint user group. It's not just SharePoint. We do the entire Microsoft stack. Join up with us and hang out in our monthly meetings. But hey, Charlotte.
Awesome. Well, to get started, another little piece of housekeeping here is you'll notice me like looking off to the side and then making things happen on screen. We've got like overlays and stuff, but I wanted to call out this little Restream logo in the upper corner, this side right here, in the upper corner above the screen. That doesn't mean that this is being like pre-recorded and played back, not live. We are actually live. The service that I'm using is something called Restream.io. And I'm testing out this new functionality called Restream Studio. And Andy and I were talking on the side and decided like, hey, let's check this thing out, because it has like the communication platform built into it, as well as like the auto layouts and auto animation stuff. And I'm always just kind of poking like what else is out there besides OBS Studio besides Teams NDI, so that I can, get a little bit of experience and again provide that feedback back to Microsoft. So let us know also the quality of the platform, the quality of this live stream. I'd be curious what you guys think about the Restream platform, and I kind of wanted to explain that watermark because I didn't want to pay for this for this live stream today. So we have the watermark.
Get a test drive it before you buy it.
Yeah, exactly. So to get started, before we like share our screen and start talking about like how to enable webinars, how to do signups and things like that, I think the biggest question that came out of the announcements of Microsoft Teams webinars is just confusion around what is a webinar, what is a meeting, what is a live event. Kind of like Apple whenever they came out with the iPad, and they were like, what is a computer? It's like now everybody's wondering like, what is a Microsoft Teams meeting if you have this thing called webinars, and is it some kind of magical thing? So Andy, have you been getting that question a lot as well whenever you talk to people?
I have. When Microsoft originally announced this for Ignite back in early spring, I moderated the session where they announced it, the first session where they announced it, and then I didn't ask the experts, and I believe you didn't ask the experts as well. And the question that we got overwhelmingly there, and the question that continues to persist is, how is this different than a Teams meeting? How is this different than a live event? Where does a webinar fit into this meeting workflow, and what are we going to get out of it? So that's a very common question from a lot of users.
Yeah, and the way that I've kind of explained it is that the meeting and webinars, those are both built on the Microsoft Teams meeting platform. So it's a live back and forth. It's an interactive experience. So the people in the webinar can chat with others. They can chat with the presenters. There's not an inherent delay like there is with a live broadcasting platform. So even though it's a more controlled and one-to-many experience, it's not a true broadcast like what we're doing broadcasting on YouTube and on Twitter right now. It's more interactive than that, but it's the ability to lock things down a little bit more and provide a registration on the beginning of it. So you have an idea of like who's going to show up and how many people to expect. And the way I explained it in my video that kind of clicked for the users when I was explaining it back near the end of the year is I view it as a pull rather than a push, where whenever you're scheduling a meeting, you're kind of deciding what path you're going to take. You're going to either do a webinar or a Teams meeting. And with a Teams meeting, you're used to scheduling meetings in Outlook or in Microsoft Teams. You're pushing that out to people's calendar. You're inviting them, and there's a little bit more of an expectation that like you're being invited, but you're kind of being told to come because it's being put on your calendar. And then you can decline it if you want to, but that's very rare. With a webinar, it's more you're creating this and you're blocking off the calendar for the presenters, but you're inviting people to be interested enough in the webinar that they pull it down onto their calendar. And that's how like Eventbrite or these other platforms where you sign up and you get a calendar attachment rather than it being forced onto your calendar, just by the nature of it existing. So hopefully that kind of like puts people in the right frame of mind to say like, am I expecting people to show up like a town hall where we invite you to come, but it's your boss telling you to come, so you better show up for the town hall? Or is this hey, we're going to do this really cool thing around campus, and if you're interested in it, come join us, come be a part of this community? Then you might be thinking more along the lines of a webinar where you want people to sign up. So
yeah, just to expand off of that a little bit, from like a user group perspective or from a technical training perspective, we've used Teams to host these events, like especially over the last year, weekly user group meetings, or monthly rather, user group meetings. But we need some way to get people to register for it, so we know how, so we can anticipate how many people are going to be there, and we can kind of base the meeting off of that. So the Teams meetings before, as John was saying, like you're basically pushing that out onto other people's calendars, but we need a way to let people sign up for it. We need a way to kind of allow people to choose to interact in it. And so like, if we post like a training event, and we just put the link out there. Anybody could grab it, and like we don't have any idea who's going to actually be attending that. So what we did without some of the Teams webinar capabilities is we came up with our own registration capabilities. We would use Microsoft Forms, and we would put a link here and fill out this form, and that would give us like an Excel sheet, but it was associated with forms and it was separate from the meeting. And then we'd have to take those names, and then we'd have to go back and send invites out manually, or we'd have to come up with like a Power Automate flow in order to capture those names and then send the meeting invites out. So we had to build something ourselves to take that registration capability and then be able to push out the meeting invites. Or we had to use another service. So like, let's say you're not a member of an organization. We had to use something like Meetup. We had to use an Eventbrite as a way to capture registration and also to be able to advertise the event. And then we'd have to take those, especially early last year, we didn't have the link to add an online meeting join up. We just had to put it in the description. And sometimes the services scrub URLs out of the description, so people would miss the event. The event's starting, and we're getting bombarded with requests. How do I join into the meeting? How do we get that information to the user? So webinars, by providing that registration form, means I don't have to go and build something with Microsoft Forms and Power Automate and then tie that back into Teams, or I don't have to go and do that process manually, but I also can minimize my dependency on another service like an Eventbrite or a Meetup to a certain extent. They still have value because there's some things that Teams webinars don't do yet that those other services would provide. But having the webinar capability to now gather registration and automatically send out the confirmation that you're registered and give you the optional calendar invite link, that's super, super helpful, and it saves us a lot of time.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see like user groups around the country and around the world if they're going to switch over to using webinar signups and abandon their Meetup or Eventbrite, because some of those Meetup groups or Eventbrite groups have kind of become communities in and of themselves. You know, it's almost like a little microsite that has been built around that registration workflow. It'll be interesting to see if people switch over to using the Teams workflow instead. I know the Kansas City Office 365 user group, we go with Eventbrite for that, and it still has a little bit more capabilities, like you said, than the Microsoft Teams workflow. So have you scheduled any webinars yet?
With the Teams tool, a ton of testing. Haven't actually rolled it out. It just hit one of my major clients this past week, and we're waiting to do the formal announcement on it next week. We're going to be doing a series of webinars using Teams for it. We're doing it as basic Teams meetings to kind of get people introduced to it. And then we're going to start rolling it out to a base of 25, 30,000 people, and then slowly start to push it from there, especially as it continues to mature with some of the new features.
Awesome. Yeah, I was curious if you've used it like in the real world yet. I think I'm going to be having my third webinar coming up here in 2 weeks, and I'll show the attendance tracking as part of that. It's starting to take off at Cerner a little bit. And Michelle, who has a YouTube channel that you should definitely check out, he says, don't forget about the information that you can leverage after the webinar. And yeah, we will get to that and talk about the attendance tab and some of the benefits that you get by being able to like have that sign up and know who actually attended versus who just signed up, what questions they answered, and cool things like that. So I guess we should dive in and start talking about how to edit things or how to enable them. What did you say?
Yeah. I was going to say, let's give a shout out to Michelle, because did a really awesome session at Teams Nation recently on easy, intuitive webinars with Microsoft Teams. I just watched that one not too long ago just to see some of the the official Teams announcements related to that. And there's some really good stuff in there, especially if you get to around 39 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm actually looking at it right now, where it talks about the webinar capabilities and the licensing that is required for it, which we're going to cover a little bit. Also did a really good comparison in there of a Teams webinar versus a live event, which we're going to talk a little bit about as well. So there was some really, really good stuff in that webinar presentation. So that was Teams Nation, Easy Intuitive Webinars with Microsoft Teams. I would highly recommend people check that out. But stick around because we got some cool stuff to talk about too.
Yeah, we'll show the we'll be sure to put a link to that Teams Nation thing. That was right before my live event presentation at Teams Nation. So I was able to get in there and see it live, and it was excellent. He does a great job. So I wanted to start out with how to enable webinars and turn them on for your entire tenant. There's probably some IT administrators watching here, and they may not have turned on the webinar feature yet, and they're not sure where to go to do that. So we'll cover that. And then Andy, I wanted you to walk through how to actually set up a webinar and create it, what the options are. So to cover the how to enable, I'm going to make my screen as big as I can here, take up the whole space. You do that in PowerShell now instead of the Teams Admin Center. I'm not quite sure if it's going to become a switch in the Teams Admin Center or not, but today you do it in PowerShell using a meeting policy, so a Teams meeting policy. So the prerequisite, if I could talk, the prerequisite for that is to get the PowerShell module for Microsoft Teams. So that's install-module Microsoft Teams, all one word. Once you have that installed, you're going to want to run a few commands. And it's basically two commands. The first one is you're going to connect to the Microsoft Teams service. And if I could make this a little bit bigger, I'm going to try to zoom in here on this thing. Hopefully that's better. It's connect-Microsoft Teams-account ID, and then you're going to put in your account ID for your tenant. So this is Megan Bowen. This is a Contoso tenant. That's why it's a bunch of random text. We're going to connect into the Microsoft Teams environment for Megan's tenant here. And that'll take a minute to load there, and then we'll take a look at what options we have for the meeting policy. So the way that you can check what meeting policies you have is this is a get CS, I think it's Microsoft Teams policies. I go up because I have it in my history here. So it's get CS Teams meeting policy. And then I'm just going to look at the global one, but if you take off the identity, that will list out every policy that you have in your tenant and what the settings are for that. But if we just look at the global policy that's applied by default to all of these users, I'm going to turn off this magnifier. I'm bad at using the Windows magnification. And here, turn that down. There's 3 or 4 settings that you want to check here for webinars specifically. And there's a ton of stuff here. There's like what it is, the description about it, whether or not you want to allow people to share video, whether or not you want to allow the whiteboard feature, all kinds of things like that. And a lot of the features for webinars specifically are down here near the bottom. And one of those is this allow meeting registration option. This is set to true right now. It's going to be true for your tenant by default. And that is whether or not you can set up a registration, whether or not the button shows up for new webinars. And then the second option right here is who can register. And that is, do I want everyone in my organization, which is everybody in your company, but also guests of your company. So if they're like a member of a Microsoft team that your company hosts, or they're a guest in Azure AD, that's the default, is everyone in your company. You can bump that up to just everyone. And if you do that, then now anybody in the world can register for the event if you select that everyone option. So those 2 options right there are specifically for webinars. And then if you're going to be doing large webinars, we recommend that you turn on this option, which is streaming attendee mode. If you enable that, that enables what's called overflow. So the ability to get up to 1,000 people in a meeting, and then it automatically creates an ad hoc live event for the 1,001 to 10,000th person in the webinar. Will go into that view only mode, but they won't just get an error message. So that's a little bit of a helpful tip right there. So if you want to turn this on for everyone in your organization and have meeting overflow, this is the command you're going to want to run. It's set-cs Teams meeting policy. And then I just did the global policy. We're going to have allow meeting registration set to true, because that's a Boolean. Then we're going to have who can register set to everyone. We want to be able to make public facing webinars. Allow engagement report. I forgot to talk about that, but that turns on the attendance tab that we'll talk about here in a minute. That allows you to download the attendee report and view who signed up and who actually attended the event. And then streaming attendee mode enabled as well. Now I have the overflow. So if you just run that command, that will set those flags to the right thing. And now after potentially up to a couple hours, your users will start seeing the webinar button, and they'll start seeing the ability to download the attendee report, make webinars that are public. And then if you get up to 1,000 people, it will just automatically roll over into an overflow space. So that's how to enable the webinar feature. I think, Andy, you wanted to show how to actually create a webinar in the Teams environment. Do you want to share your screen? We'll go ahead and bring that one up right here. There we go.
All right, so John just walked through the PowerShell side of it. That's going to be for the IT pros. So what are our end users going to see? So if you're an organizer of a meeting, what are you actually going to see whenever you start to go in there? And this is what has started to roll out general availability tenants all across the world over the last few weeks. So when we go into Teams, we head into Calendar, and I go up to New Meeting. I'm going to have a new option that's actually listed there now. In addition to scheduling meeting and live event, there's going to be a new webinar option, and the icon's actually pretty cool. It's a little person behind the podium, but that's going to allow me to go ahead and schedule a webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Schedule Webinar, and it looks very similar to scheduling a Teams meeting, but a couple of things jump out right away. Highlighted kind of in yellow, and then it faded away up in this top section. We actually had, do you want to have registration for this webinar? And then there's an option in there to actually view the registration form. So we can customize that registration form that we're going to use to start collecting that information from our users. The other thing is the require registration for a require registration. That's the setting that John was actually just talking about. So I'm going to start there. Then we'll talk about the registration form, and then we'll talk about the invite here and the implications of that. So let me just go through this drop down. So the PowerShell one of the PowerShell options John was just mentioning was requiring registration. So I go in here and I have none and people in the org. I haven't gone into PowerShell and activated the for everyone. This is the default setting as it comes out of box. So I haven't enabled for everyone. So this is going to be basically webinars for people that are part of my tenant, my Microsoft 365 tenant. Now, if I switch that back to none, then it removes the registration option up at the top. And essentially, this is like scheduling a Teams meeting. So this is like going to that drop down and then just saying, well, let's just schedule a meeting. And then you'll notice, like, I'm here just scheduling like a normal meeting. I can go up to the drop down and then switch it to people in the org. It brings back the registration. And now it's like, now we're back in basically the registration option. But the other thing is, like, when we go to schedule one of these, it removes the ability to schedule this in a channel. We can't schedule a webinar in a channel. They're scheduled as a team meeting. So they're typically associated with chat and that kind of experience. So that's just a couple of the nuances that we see there. So let's actually go into the webinar. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give this brief description. Type today. I apologize. All right, and then it's got the icon over here represents the webinar icon, and then it's going to say your required presenters and then your optional presenters. So this is where I can go in, and anybody that I want or that I need to be a presenter, I'm going to be able to go ahead and enter in their information. I would also be able to link to somebody maybe external. So in this case, I'm going to link to my Gmail account. So I've got me as an external, and then I've got an internal user from there. And then I can go ahead and provide the rest of the details that we're going to provide for this particular webinar. So this is what's going to be sent out to the other presenters that are going to associate with this particular webinar. Now, I could go ahead and view the registration form, and I can customize that, but I can get back to this as well. But if you go and you click view registration form, now we get the ability to customize the registration form that the users are going to use in their web browser to actually participate in the webinar. So we have the ability to go in, and we can now, when this is first announced, this wasn't initially there, but it's in the process of being worked on. We can upload an image, so we can apply some kind of branding to it. So we can have like that corporate identity that for that particular event. So let me just grab. I got an icon here. All right, so just drop this in. And now I've just branded that with my company branding associated with that. And then I can go ahead and I can provide the event details. So like I might have for the internal presenters a name that's going to be different than what I present to people that are going to register for this. So like I might call this one like something like this. So it's a catchy name and it pops up for those users. I'll go ahead and pick the time that I want to run this, duration for the event. So it's not all that different than working with other meeting types. And then provide the description for the users, or for the details for the attendees. All right. Now, another cool thing is when I'm on the registration form, I can define speakers. So I can say who the speakers of this event are going to be, and I can go ahead and advertise that ahead of time. So I'm going to be one of the speakers. I could go ahead and add that, or if like I've got one of my my colleagues, I could go ahead and enter them in, and then provide their bio, any details that I want to share with that. And I can actually add multiple speakers inside of here if I need to. So that's going to show up on the registration form as well. And then when the users register for the actual event, there's going to be essentially 3 fields that they are required to fill out, and then we can add in some additional optional fields. First name, last name, and email are going to be required for the event, and then we can add in additional fields. And so things like address, city, state, zip code, country, region, industry, job title, organization, and even custom questions based off of the input of the choice type can actually be added here. I saw recently, and I don't remember if it was on a YouTube video around this or if it was internal to an org that I'm a part of. Users were saying that one of their critiques about the webinars was being able to have those fields. I'm not sure if they expanded the add field option, but the fields that they were requesting were there by default. They're pretty much industry standard fields, and then you can ask any custom questions that you want. All right, so I'm just entering in a couple of fields here, and so now I've started to build the form. Now I can go ahead and save this, and I can preview it for the organization. But also, as I'm working here, notice that you have the option to copy the registration link at the top. This is what I'm actually going to share with attendees. So this is what I might publish. I might promote internally on Yammer, for instance, and I'm going to promote this link to my users. And then I can also view this in the browser. I'm going to go ahead and save it, and it's going to tell me make sure you go ahead and send the invite out to the presenters. But let's go ahead and I'm going to close this. I'm going to go ahead and send the invite out to the users. And so now I've got this Teams webinar set up. That's going to be sent out. It's just going to take a second, and I can see the webinar from there. I get all of my local notifications around that. I've also just received an email through Gmail that I've been invited as a presenter as part of the presentation. Now, there are a couple of last things that I want to point out here to kind of demystify a couple of questions that I've seen rather frequently. So the one question, and I think we've already seen a version of this in the chat here live today. The one question that I get is, so this is basically just a Teams meeting with a registration associated with it. Not quite. There's actually more going on behind the scenes than just that. And you'll actually find that out when you go to actually look at the meeting details. So like we go into the meeting options right up here. And so this is going to load in my browser. Let me just pull this window over so everybody can see it. All right, so these are the meeting options for like a normal Teams meeting. So we go in and these are the things like who can bypass the lobby, announcing when people join or leave the call, who can present, allow the mic for the attendees, allow camera for the attendees, allow meeting chat, and allow reactions. So these are what we see for a normal Teams meeting. So let's actually switch that up and let's go back to the webinar that we just created. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to open up the webinar meeting details. All right, so now I'm going to go back in and I'm from the webinar meeting details. Let's go up to meeting options at the top, and we'll open that up in a separate tab. And I'll go split screen with this in just a second. But now we see the options that are specific for the webinar. And one of the things that jumps out at me right away is the select presenters for this meeting. It's actually pulling from the invite that I created based off of the webinar. So I went ahead and it set who can present to specific people, and it went ahead and pulled the names from the people that I invited as presenters, and went ahead and added those options. Now, just to kind of go split screen with this, let me just. And then just kind of compare the two. So like we've got the webinar option on one side, and then we've got the Teams meeting on the left side over here. Just kind of compare. So for the default Teams meeting, who can bypass the lobby? Everyone. Whereas with the bypass option for the webinar, that's going to be people that I invite, and then we still have options to be able to control that. We would also, as part of that. One second. All right, so we would also just double check the options, allow callers to bypass the lobby. They're both, the webinar is actually defaulted to no, but we could open that up. Announce when people or callers join or leave, that defaults to no. Already talked about the who can present options inside of here. Allow mic for the attendees, allow camera for the attendees. Just like a typical meeting, that is both allowed or enabled as yes. Allow meeting chat. Allow meeting chat is set for in meeting only. So a default meeting, a normal meeting, you get the before, during, and after chat experience. This is just going to limit it to meeting only. And then we're going to be able to determine reactions. So with the webinar, just like the default meeting, that's actually going to be set to a default to yes. So we get the registration form, that is part of it, but the meeting options on the back end defined by the meeting policies that we have through the admin center, this is what's actually been enabled. But things like who can present and selecting presenters, that's already enabled for us, and it goes ahead and it pulls that from the meeting invite. So that's going to be helpful, and it's going to save some time versus trying to schedule this as like maybe a normal meeting. Couple other things based off of going back into the Teams calendar and the event there. We're going to talk more about this in detail in just. But now we have the registration. So based off of who actually registers for the event, I can go ahead and download the registration associated with that. That's going to download in an Excel file for me, and then I can use that for registration tracking related to the event. But John's got some more information related to that he's going to expand on here in just a few minutes. So that's what I wanted to kind of show from the organizer experience with this, how things are similar, but also some of the nuances that are going to be a little different.
Yeah, I think that the nicest thing that they added in since the early demonstrations at Fall Ignite until the actual launch, I think one of the best things that they added on before GA was that like customization of the meeting options. The fact that it's almost like a template, if you will, without using the word template. That by clicking that webinar button, it saves you a few clicks, you know, because like it sets it up the way that you would ideally want it to be, with like only people I invite, don't allow people to forward this around. You know, having the meeting chat set to in the meeting only, like that's great for me internally, because I want to drive all of the Q&A after the class that I'm teaching. I want to drive all that to Yammer and not have to like own this Teams chat forever, you know? So the fact that like the Teams chat gets locked down after everybody leaves is super helpful for me. And that's nice because you get to, you know, not worry about those things. I always encourage people to use the meeting options, and check those out. Be thoughtful about creating it, but in reality, we all know that most people aren't going to check those meeting options after they send their meeting off. So it's nice that they kind of take care of that for you.
And that goes back to the workflow of the meeting. Like we schedule a meeting and then we get the meeting options. So like I've got to go back and then define the meeting options after I've sent the invite out. This just streamlines that whole workflow for me so that it's already set some of those things for me. And if I do need to tweak the meeting options, I can do that before the webinar starts, but it's not as critical versus like what we kind of worked with in previous iterations of using meetings to deliver a webinar-like experience.
Yeah. Before I share my screen and show the 3 new things that have popped up in my tenant since Go Live, I've got a couple questions that came in through the chat. One of those was from JC. This is a common question that I've gotten is it possible to control the number of registrations? Can we put a cap on that? And I answered in the chat, but I wanted to answer verbally that unfortunately at this time, you can't put a maximum number of registrations on there. I really wish that we could put like a registration max, but also like a max before it turned into overflow. It'd be kind of nice to like lower that 1,000 limit artificially if we wanted to. I have given that feedback to the Microsoft product group, but what I'm hoping for is not only would I like to be able to add a maximum, but I would love it if it just took care of a wait list for me. If it could automatically create like a second list that then like if someone canceled on the registration, it would automatically pick the next one on the list and add them to the active registrations. I think that would be the way to kind of solve it all of the way rather than just doing like the minimum viable product. So I hope that Microsoft is listening, but I haven't seen anything public about allowing a maximum right now.
From a technical training standpoint, I want a hard cap on the number of registrations. If I'm going to be doing like a webinar with more kind of a workshop feel to it, I want to cap that because typically the ratio for our instructor to student is like 1 to 25. Anything over 25, and it gets a little too hard to handle. So yeah, to be productive because it snowballs. So if we could put like a hard cap on that for some technical training scenarios, that would be great. I don't want 300 people in a technical training webinar. And I know there's other situations and other things we can do around that, but yeah, hard limit would be nice. I concur.
So the next question that I wanted to cover verbally is Dan had a great question about how can we get the registration details in a way that we can use it? Like, is it available in the Microsoft Graph? Can we, pull this data in and do something else with it? Can we manipulate it in some way, show it in Power BI or something like that? That is a great question and allows me to share another video in the chat with you guys. But our friend Steven, he has a channel. It's, what is it? Steven C365. It's under What's New in Microsoft Teams is the name of his channel. He has a great new video on webinars talking about the secret list that is created by a Microsoft Teams webinar. And basically, to summarize it, if you didn't know already, whenever you add a registration, what it's doing on the back end is under your own OneDrive account in the Microsoft List service, it's creating a list for that registration to live. And whenever somebody signs up, it actually, the registration becomes an item on that list, on that Microsoft list. So he shows in the video that's in the chat here, he shows the ability to go grab that list, get the ID for it, and then create a Power Automate flow so that if a new item shows up on that list, I can grab it, I can do something like a custom thank you email or add them to a CRM database or something like that. And that just really like opens up the possibilities with how to use this. I don't know that Microsoft intended for everybody to start automating against that Microsoft list, but it doesn't take long for the MVPs to find out, oh, that's a list and I can do stuff with that list. So I wanted to share that because it's really cool.
We're going to stress test everything.
Yet, Andy? Oh yeah,
I
for
have not
sure.
watched that one yet, but I will. That will be on my short list for follow up this afternoon,
Yeah, that's a
especially if it
good one to
involves
check.
any
He
kind
does
of
an
Power
awesome
Automate.
job. Yeah, yeah, super cool. So we'll let a few other questions come in here. If keep asking questions, and we'll bring them up on screen here and go through them. But 3 things that have showed up new in my environment since my video about webinars is one of them Andy showed, and I've got my awesome webinar right here that Megan set up. One of those is a new meeting option. So there's a new meeting option that happened like 3 days after I published that video. That if you didn't notice, I worked on that video for like 4 weeks. I actually recorded the beginning of it when I thought it was imminent, and like Andy was seeing the feature in his tenant, and then it was disappearing a couple hours later, and then it was showing up again. I was like, okay, we got to get ready to publish this. And then like 3 weeks went by, and I couldn't record the rest of it because like I wanted to wait till it was like in the GA state. And so I like wore the same shirt and like rearranged everything exactly the same, trimmed my beard to try to like make it not seem like I jumped a month into the future and finished the video. But then of course a week later a bunch of stuff comes out. One of those is this option right here. This like third from the bottom is allow camera for attendees. This is a new meeting option, but it's also, you know, as Andy mentioned, it's available in webinars, and they go through and they set these options for you. But allow camera for attendees is like the allow unmuting, the ability to restrict whether or not somebody can unmute themselves and just blow up and ask a question, interrupting the presenter. You can turn that off so that it disables their microphone icon. Well, this second one right here disables their camera icon as well. And basically for the entire group of attendees who are not on the list of presenters, they will have a disabled microphone and a disabled camera if you set both of those to no. The nice thing too is you can turn that on for a single person. And ideally, if you have like a ton of people in your meeting, you would have them raise their hand, tell them, hey, raise your hand. And then that will alert you that they want to unmute. So you can right click on that person in the participant list along the side, and you can say allow to unmute. You'll also be able to say allow to share camera. So they can turn their camera on, they can unmute and ask their question. And then you can go disable their camera again if you want to. So that's a brand new feature that came out, I think, early last week or the end of last week. I saw it pop up. The second thing is I finally got the attendance tab. So Michelle was mentioning this in the chat that we should make sure to cover the attendance tab, and that is available now. In the past week, you had to go in here and download the registration. So from the meeting details, you click this registration button, it downloads a CSV for you, and then you can open it up. And that was separate from the attendance sheet. So after your meeting was over, you'd have a second box right here for the attendance. Now you got 2 CSV files that you have to compare. Well, the attendance tab up here at the top that just showed up in the past week merges those 2 together and prevents you from having to download something. So whenever you've got your attendance kind of ramping up, you can see how many people have registered, how many people have canceled. And then this attended box right here will show blank until you have your actual webinar. Once you have your webinar, it will populate with how many people showed up. So now across here, without doing some kind of a formula, you can see, well, how many people registered and how many people actually showed up. And I think in my past webinars so far, I get about 30 to 50% of people actually show up. I have a lot more people that register and then a lot less of them show up, probably because it's free. You know, like Andy, I think you charge for your training sessions, right? So I mean, there's more incentive to actually show up for those. Mine are just like, oh, what do I want to hear my coworker talk about? So a lot less
Depends
people
on the
show up
client,
today.
but yes.
Yeah. So that's really helpful, and I'll show you live one of my events here to kind of show you what this actually looks like in the real world, because it's blank right now. Bringing up Teams on my other screen here, and let's go to 2 weeks in the future. I'm going to be teaching a Microsoft Teams webinar for Microsoft Teams meetings best practices. So it's called like Teams Meeting Basics. is the name of that. So I'm going to switch this over, bring this on screen. And this is my actual webinar. And I've got the attendance sheet and the registration. Those are two separate boxes. The other thing is I've selected certain options here. So this is how I set up my actual webinars whenever I teach a class internally. It's set to people I invite, so we don't want people forwarding the invite around. We don't have any kind of a lobby, but this would, I would set that to yes. That's our default for our tenant. The who can present, these are folks on my workforce adoption team who help out with these trainings and do the trainings themselves as well. So I've got those three folks in there that kind of help out with this. And then the camera for attendees right here, I set those to on for my webinars because I want people to be interactive. This is an internal webinar. It's only other associates. So we're fine leaving that open. But I think I'm going to have to make a change on this, Andy, because as I looked at the attendance sheet here, once this loads up and I can bring that on screen, I'm going to hide the email addresses so people don't see the internal email addresses, but I can see that I've got 253 people have registered for this. As you were talking about, like these kind of technology training sessions, is like, oh no, like I'm going to have 253 people that might like, ask questions and like unmute themselves. So I think I'm probably going to turn off the microphone in this case. But
I would recommend that.
Yeah, I think it's going to get a little bit quickly. But if I go back in the past here, I taught a OneDrive class. I think it's the week before. Yeah, my OneDrive class. And this is how I had set it up before. So I want to show you, again, not sharing any email addresses here. Let's bring that on screen. I want to show you guys this, like 113 people viewed the registration page, 58 people signed up for it, and then 32 people actually attended it. And then you can see like, what the like average attendance time was, how long did it last? This is super helpful as I'm like developing classes. I can see like I'm targeting a 2-hour class. How long did it actually last? You just have that stat without having to figure it out. And then of course you've got the recording and transcripts is coming together. So I've got this tab with the transcript available. I can share that recording with those attendees. But that's kind of what I was talking about. About half the people actually show up for the live event or show up for the webinar versus like who actually signed up. And then the third thing, we can show this later on if you want to, Andy, but I've noticed that presenter modes have started rolling out as well. And this is, again, it's a Teams meeting feature, but it's useful in webinars. And the first one to start rolling out, and my users have started seeing it, is the standout functionality, which allows you to be cut out. Your head and shoulders are cut out, and they're put in the lower corner of your content, and everybody can see you on top of your content. I kind of call it the Twitch mode because it's like how every Twitch streamer does green screening whenever they're gaming. But that's a pretty helpful feature. The thing to remember, though, with presenter modes is that, at least right now, it does not record that view into the meeting. So if you're recording your meeting, it's going to be the regular Teams layout with the ribbon across the bottom, and you'll have a black background behind you. It's just something to be aware of with that. So what's next, Andy? Do you want to answer a couple more questions here? We can just
there were a couple of questions
that they come up.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have come up recently that kind of work with the flow as we're going along with this. One of the questions relates to Q&A, adding a Q&A or a moderated Q&A to the webinar, which is currently only available in live events. So that's one of the big differences between a Teams webinar and a live event, is that the live event actually does support that Q&A feature, and it's not in the Teams webinar currently. I agree. I would very much like to have that feature. I don't always want a full chat window when I'm delivering. I would kind of like to have a light moderated experience, kind of like we're doing here in this live stream, where we can, pick the questions that apply to the topic that we're talking about at the time, and then, broadcast and answer a solution to that. The live Q&A can definitely help with that. And to be able to have other presenters contribute to that as we're working in the webinar would definitely be helpful. And that's another kind of question that that we're getting. What role do the other presenters get as far as participating in the webinar? For example, if we hit that cap and they try to join afterwards, are they going to be able to participate in the webinar, or are they going to be stuck in the view only participant mode as part of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that could be really scary for somebody setting up a very, very large webinar. Is like, oh no, are they going to get bumped out? In my experience, what I've seen is that the external presenter doesn't get added as a specific presenters. So like under who can present, you have specific people. Yours, William Honeycutt, was automatically added there. When I've tried external people, it doesn't show up for me there. I'm curious, like, is William Honeycutt in that tenant? Is that a guest in Azure AD? So it's like able to recognize that person?
Yes, because I've invited that person
Okay.
into Teams previously, so I do have guest access turned on in my tenant, and so I did invite that particular account in previous demonstrations and whatnot into a Microsoft team, and by in turn it added them as part of the Active Directory, and so they're technically listed as a guest in my AD. A better way to test something like that out would be a true guest to the tenant, somebody completely external, not listed as a guest in Azure AD.
Yeah, whenever I've tested like with like my wife's email, it didn't show up, because she's not a guest. So
yeah,
that's good to find out together here that the guests work, but the truly external people don't. You guys probably just heard my 3-year-old run by my office screaming. He roared about something. Matt asks if we're going to be recording this session and making it available. Yes, we are. This is automatically going to become on demand afterwards, and I'll be leaving it up on my channel, like the chat replay and all that cool stuff. I really love being able to bring questions up on screen though, because even if we lose the chat replay, we have the ability, like it's baked into the recording right here.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I think that's really cool. So Tom said, like if they would only add moderated Q&A, I totally agree with that. I'm hopeful for a true moderated Q&A experience like live events have. I think if we get that, then that's just one less thing to separate those two, live events versus meetings. There's kind of a gap between those, and for some people that's a lot to overcome, So yeah, I'm hopeful for a true moderated Q&A. We don't want to show all of the chat necessarily. Kind of like we're doing here. We can show the chat one at a time.
Do we want to go ahead and demo or show like the webinar start screens, like as it's kicking off, like what the organizer is going to see versus like what an attendee would actually see?
Yeah. Do you want to share that on your screen?
Yeah, I can drive that.
Awesome. Yeah, you're up now.
All right, so this is the webinar demo that I created. Notice I don't have the attendance tab yet, so it hasn't hit my tenant. This account's registered as a public preview, so nothing other than public preview for this particular tenant. So I haven't seen the attendance tab show up inside of here yet, but I'll go ahead and join. So it just pops it out in a separate window. Choose audio, mic, whatever we need, and then join. So very much like a default Teams meeting. Also, device settings, I'll be able to pick and choose audio input through microphone, output through speakers, noise suppression, that's great. And then I can pick and choose the camera that I want to run with. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and join. Keep in mind, I'm an organizer of this particular meeting / I am also a presenter inside of here. So this is what I'm actually going to see on my screen as I'm getting ready to start this. So just a couple of things to point out. It looks very much like a normal Teams meeting for me. I've got my toolbar up at the top. And so I'm going to see things like my participants pane, the chat window, my reactions, as well as ability to raise my hand. There is the breakout room feature inside of there. So the breakout rooms are going to be supported. I've got the the dot, 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 the ellipsis, the somebody referred to this as the meatball menu. I thought that was pretty clever. Hadn't heard that one until recently, but I've got that menu for device settings and some of the other things for the meeting, and then audio, video, and then the share tray inside of there as well. Just expanding the meatball menu. Then you're going to see like your meeting options. So we would be able to change some of the meeting options now that I'm actually in the process of this. Pulls over the same settings that we've seen before. Meeting notes, information, and then we get the different views. So depending on the number of participants and things like that, your galleries, going full screen, background effects, live captions, transcriptions, recordings, all of this is supported here inside of the meeting. So this is me from the meeting organizer perspective. This is what I'm going to see as I'm getting ready to kick things off. On the other side of that, though, I have, let me go over here and clear that out. All right, so I've got this this demo user over here, and I want this person to sign up and participate in the webinar. So I need to get them the registration form so that they can fill it out, and then they can actually receive the invite. So that's where we've got the registration link. So we would share that, publish it in Yammer, a web page, website, and then the user can actually fill out that registration form. So let's paste and go. So this is what they see whenever they're getting ready to sign up for it. Now, because they're a member of the organization and my settings were set for members of the organization, it went ahead and filled out first name, last name, and email address for that, that user. And then any additional questions that we want to collect from them, they would be able to fill out. The event details, including the custom name and then the speaker bio and details, are all going to be there for them. So I'm going to go ahead and register. Now, we talked about this previously, but we've done some of this in the past using things like Microsoft Forms or the third-party tools such as Eventbrite or Meetup. But this builds the registration form for me, just loads in the web browser. One less thing I have to do. It also gives us a confirmation. So the user fills it out, and so there's a confirmation, and they can actually join the event right from here. In addition to the confirmation on this particular screen, if I were to go and visit this user's inbox, I should have an email confirmation inside of there as well. All right, so I've got my email registration, seats reserved. I've got a link to go ahead and join that event. And as John mentioned earlier, we have the calendar invite. So we get that ICS file. We can go ahead and we can optionally add that to the calendar, but that's included as part of the confirmation email as well. So we technically have a double confirmation from the web page where they register for the event, and then inside of the email communication as well. Now I'm going to go back into the calendar here, just give it a quick little refresh. And we get the test meeting showing up inside of there, but they can also just join from the confirmation screen. So I'm going to go ahead and join in. Now, I'm going to just do join in on the web browser for this particular user. And so typical join in screen, depending on the options that we provided for them, mic and camera could be turned on, and they would be able to use that. And then I would be able to go ahead and join that experience. And it'll tell if you can connect or not. But I would be able to join in the end user experience from there. So let me go back to the meeting, and I'm back on the organizer side here. So this is what I would see, and then just wait for others to join and participate. So that kind of walks through some of what we're going to see as we are joining from an organizer perspective, but also what the end user sees from their end and their perspective.
Yeah, so something else to share, like what do you want to show your attendees before the event starts, right? Some people might start piling in like 15 minutes or even 5 minutes early, and you get this like, you know, kind of blank area. You want to share something with them. I want to show a video or share a video with you guys right here. That Tracy Vanderschiff, she has an awesome video recently. I'm not sharing my screen. There's my screen. She has an awesome video lately that she published at the end of April. That's how to like create a lobby screen. And this is where you have like a really good opportunity to like make that lobby screen. It's like, hey, we're going to get started soon. don't worry, you know, your computer's not messing up. There's nothing to see right now. If you give somebody something to see as they're waiting, then that really helps a lot. And this video goes through. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat here for you guys. It goes through, though. She has an animated GIF or GIF, depending on how you say it, that counts down from 15 minutes, and I think it's in 10-second intervals. So it goes from like 11:30 to 11:20 to 11:10, and she actually like put that together in a little stopwatch. And then I think this is just an excellent idea that she added this screen in PowerPoint. Whoops, it started playing. She added this screen in PowerPoint to kind of give you like a guide to Microsoft Teams. Hey, here's where you mute yourself. Here's where the chat is. Here's how you share information. And she has like this tips and tricks down at the bottom, as well as like reactions and stuff to kind of like familiarize people with Teams, because, you know, what else are they going to do for the 15 minutes that they're waiting? And that leads to another question that we got during the Ask the Experts, Andy, that you tagged, is what about like a music mode? You know, is there the capability to play some music before the webinar starts, or show, you know, a commercial or something like that? And the answer that I have so far is that nothing's publicly been announced that I know of from Microsoft about a true like music mode or like a preloading screen, kind of like what we had at the beginning of this live event on YouTube. But what you can do is something like that. You can show this as a placeholder. Then if you share your screen along with audio, then you can certainly play some music in the background. I would recommend, especially if it's externally facing, don't just open up Spotify and play like top 40 or something like that. You know, don't play copyrighted music. But if you have some music that you're allowed to play, you can certainly play that through your system audio if you want.
I can actually demo that. I've got PowerPoint pulled up. I can show that real quick.
Perfect. Yeah, man.
Let's do that.
I can click and drag, and now your screen's big. Awesome.
All right, so I'm just going to go into, say I'm going to deliver a technical training event, a workshop, and we've got the lobby. And so to John's point, what ends up happening more often than not, people join early and you get those questions. Has it started yet? I'm not seeing anything. Can you hear me? And, you know, people are testing to making sure that everything's working. Or in some situations, you see them running around the house, scrambling to get to the couch, turning off the microphone, the camera, and so forth. All right. So what we can do is we can actually go in, and in PowerPoint, it's actually super easy. You can just grab an animated GIF. You can grab a short little video, and you can just drop that into the PowerPoint. I'm going to do a short little video, and you can find these. There's so many of these out there. It's absolutely ridiculous. So let me just grab one real quick. Yeah, I need to clean up my download folder. All right, so let's see. Let's preview this one real. Oops. All right, so that's really busy, but that'll work. All right, so for our purposes, so I'm going to drop that into my PowerPoint presentation. It'll take just a second. That one, oh, that one might be a little large. That one's a gig. All right, so video's there, and then through the video settings, I can just go ahead and I can actually set that the playback to actually loop until it's actually stopped. And so when I go into my screen presenting mode and then just go ahead and start that, it'll go ahead and start playing. Now, depending on the event, what I would actually do is I would go into Teams. All right, and so I'm going to go to the share tray, and there's two different ways to actually go about this, and we're going to address a follow-up question to that in just a bit. When I typically deliver a webinar, I prefer to broadcast my screen, because when I'm delivering a webinar, it's usually around technical training. And so I'm switching from a PowerPoint presentation to a web browser window. So we have a couple of bullet points here, and then here's the live demo. And by sharing the screen, I can easily move back and forth between those multiple applications, and I don't have to share, stop sharing, and then reshare. It just provides a smoother user experience. So I typically share the screen. All right, so I'm going to share the screen here. Now, with PowerPoint, it's loaded. I've got it in kind of the window mode, browsed by an individual user. the animation is not playing. So I just have to click on PowerPoint again, and then the animation will start to play. And so now anybody that's actually viewing the webinar, they actually see this video playing in the background. And so there's some animation on top of that. Now to take that to a secondary level, not only would I put the video in there, but just go and insert some text. Just drop your text box in. We'll make sure that this is rather large so we can see it. And then just drop in, the time. And so they can see that. And then the other thing that you can do is if you have the video, you can also go ahead and you can drop in some music. Now, as part of the share tray, let me go back to the share tray. When I'm going to share anything, we now have I'm on a Mac, so this is something that's relatively new for us. But Windows have had it for a while. We can include computer sound. So if I have like a video playing and there is music associated with it, I can go ahead and toggle that on. Just make sure the driver is installed, and then I can share that screen or that window, and then you'll see the animation running. So I'll just share the screen, go over. Here's the animation that I want to kick off. And it's because of Tracy and John that I've actually started implementing this in my workshops and my trainings to go ahead and just have that autoplay. I don't use one that's typically this busy, but I like this one for this particular demo just to kind of show you that. Now, there is kind of a follow-up question I know people are going to ask. You're playing this video. There's a lot of animation. Is that dependent on your local resources? Because I am, and your internet connection, because I am broadcasting this from my desktop and then I'm sharing it. There could be latency there. There could be some lag associated with that. So that's the other thing that you should consider with this is when you share. And this was something that was addressed in the Teams webinar that I mentioned kind of at the beginning. If you upload this into PowerPoint Live, you're going to upload it into OneDrive, and then it's going to broadcast and it's going to play back from there. So it should have that video inside of it, and it should be able to play and present for the users inside of there. And it looks like it's still loading that. I'm using the OneDrive Sync client. I just added that. That file was much larger than I realized when I started to add it. So it looks like it's taking a little while for that animation to load. So you might want to preload some of these presentations. We'll let this load and come back to it in a little bit, and we'll see if the animation actually plays in there. But that should minimize some of the latency or the lag associated with like a welcome screen like that. But that also carries over to video that you're going to deliver during the presentation. Or during the webinar event. So that's just something that is relatively new. Some of the PowerPoint Live, I know that's rolled out over the last couple of months. And then one last thing while I'm here, I just want to mention this because John was talking about it, the presenter mode. So like we've got the ability to activate the camera, and then we can overlay ourselves on top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So there I am. And then this is getting very meta, many different Andys in the same screen. And then we've got the presenter mode there. And then let's say we want to just overlay this on top of a window. And let me go, there's the window. But what the users are going to see, let me move the screen over. What they're going to see is going to be something that looks like this. And there's a little screen that I can put on a secondary monitor, and I can actually see what the users are going to see. So this is technically the presenter mode. So you can see me. It does a pretty good job of eliminating the background. I don't have a green screen. Mm-hmm. There's no chroma key on my part, and it's just overlaying me on top of that presentation. The reason the PowerPoint's not playing is because that's a local file, and the PowerPoint has to be the most local file and active. And now you can see that it's actually running, and I get that effect as well.
Yeah, that's super nice. To be honest, I am impressed that your computer is holding up with all of that. You're really pushing Edge screen sharing to its limit.
Fan definitely kicked on in that one.
Yeah, I bet. Even with your laptop cooler that it's sitting on. That's awesome. A question from the chat here. It says, is that live for global audiences? The over PowerPoint presenting, that is rolling out now. So it's one of the announcements they made at the end of May. That's like what's new in Teams. So I've got probably, I would say, a little bit over half of my users are seeing it in our enterprise environment. But I do have users that haven't seen that feature show up yet. But yeah, it is prod at this
I
point.
just got it in this
Roll out.
tenant last Friday. It just went live for me last
Oh, did
Friday,
you?
so it's definitely rolling out. Yeah.
Okay.
And one more kind of segue off of that. That's a really cool feature to be able to put me on top of the presentation and then to present as things, you know, are actually happening. That puts a face to it. That gives like that real kind of buy-in from users. They can they see somebody and they can interact with them on the screen. We've been able to do that with some other tools. John mentioned one of these earlier. One of those tools is actually OBS. We've been able to do that in OBS for a while. So you can go into OBS and you can create a screen, and you can, you know, you have a video capture device. And I'm just going to quickly show this, but this is a secondary tool. This is another tool that you have to use in order to do something like this. So let me just very quickly mock this up. So like, all right, so there's my webcam in OBS. And then what I would do is I would go in and I would say, well, like, let's do like a window source, or let's do like a window capture. And so I would say window capture, and I'm going to tell it what to capture. And so I would go in and say, well, I want you to find my desktop, or I want you to find like my PowerPoint presentation, and then broadcast over that. So maybe I'll do, instead of a window capture, I'll just do the desktop real quick. All right, so we'll just go and we'll do display capture. It's going to ask me which one do you want, display 1 or 2. All right, so there's display number 2. I'm just going to very quickly transform this. All right, I'm going to change the order on this, and then I'm going to take Andy, and we're going to shrink Andy down. Actually, let me undo that video capture device. There we go. All right, and so I would shrink Andy down, and then like, you know, I would go in and kind of crop myself off, and like I would use OBS for all of this, but then I'm having to run this other tool to do this, and then I have to output this somewhere. So like I could start a virtual cam, and I could feed the virtual cam as my camera into Microsoft Teams. So like if I just start the virtual cam on this, it's gonna run. All right, so that's gonna go ahead and run. And I'm gonna move this over to another window. And then like, let's say I were in the presentation, what I would do is I would go in, and my camera here, I would actually switch the camera from my default camera, and I would point it at my my virtual cam. So I would go and I should be able to see like the OBS virtual cam. And so now I get that overlay feature inside of there, and I could green screen or chroma out. But in the past, we've had to do this with OBS. We've had to create the scene. We've had to create the overlay. We've had to output that as a virtual cam and then feed that into Microsoft Teams, and then make that available in there. But I've had to use that other tool. The point of demoing this and showing this is I'm a huge fan of OBS. I think it's awesome, but that's another technical layer to doing things like that. And now Microsoft's rolling in that percent over option right inside of Teams. And so anybody can do this, you know, from somebody who doesn't have experience working with OBS, for somebody who is delivering a Teams meeting, you know, for one of the first times. You can go in and do that present over mode, and you can get that face-to-face interaction with the attendees and still have the content in the background and create a rich webinar experience for those users.
Yeah, something that was brought up in the chat as well here. Steve has a question. I'm going to bring it up on screen here. Hey, is there a start live button so I can like get everything arranged the way I want it, and then like, you know, kind of have people like waiting on the side and then bring them into the meeting when it's time for them? There isn't available yet. So what you want to do is kind of be creative about your timing, or be thoughtful about the timing of when things start. I shared in my guide video last week, a trick that I do is that you can shift the start time for your webinar. So say that your webinar is going to be from noon to 1 p.m. You can create your meeting to be 11:30 to 1 p.m. So put that 30 minutes at the beginning. And then in the registration sign-up form, that has its own date picker. So you could make the registration form noon to 1, your meeting behind it a half hour longer. And then now you've got that buffer space built into the front. When people sign up for the webinar, it will give them a calendar attachment for the noon to 1 slot for what the form is set up for. And they don't know that you're there a half hour early, but the presenter has the whole calendar block. So you don't have to like put them into a meeting and then have them join another meeting and hope that that works. Just put them in the same meeting, but early. Another trick that is either rolling out or will roll out soon is this. I'm going to bring up my screen here real quick for the message center. This feature to lock a meeting. So you could use the lobby, right? You could like create the lobby, force the lobby, and say only specific people can get in. But another thing you could do is you could lock the meeting, and this is going to be rolled out by middle of June timeframe. And with that, you'd be able to go to the participants, click the dot menu or the meatball menu. As Andy mentioned, I'm going to start trying to use meatball menu and click lock meeting. If you click that, then the attendees would see, I think the screen says this meeting has not started yet or something like that. I think they'll see like this waiting screen, and then you can talk to your people in kind of like a green room or something like that, make sure all the presenters are happy. Then you could unlock the meeting, and that would allow people to then join. With the lobby, you get to see all of them listed out there, so then you could hit admit all, and it kind of pulls all of them in. I think that might be a little bit better of a user experience, but this new lock feature is coming as well. And then something you were talking about, like the standout mode where you're like in the bottom corner. I also wanted to point out that in the message center, not only can you do that today, you could do this with a shared screen. So you share your entire screen and you can put yourself in the corner. Someone asked about if you could do that with a PowerPoint. Can you use PowerPoint Live and put yourself in the corner? You will be able to. It's rolling out now, mid-May through mid-June. So by the middle to end part of June, you'll not only be able to put yourself in the corner of a shared screen, but you'll also be able to put yourself in the corner of a PowerPoint Live. So if you want that high fidelity, best rendering of your PowerPoint slide deck, and you want to be in the corner, then you'll be able to do that by the middle of this month. It's rolling out right now. So I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some more of those features start to roll out. There were a few different versions of the presenter mode announced back at Ignite. The presenter on top in the corner is just one. There's a newscaster layout, which kind of gives you a background, puts your whatever you're presenting in a nice squared box, and then you kind of on top of that newscast style just off to the side. There's a few things that would be really helpful for, but some of us have been doing those things in OBS, and that extra technical layer, they're eliminating some of that, and that's really exciting for a lot of users.
Yeah. And I want to say, so those haven't started rolling out yet, but I think they're fast follow. So like hopefully in the next like couple weeks or so, we'll see those other modes. The side-by-side is what the side-by-side one obviously is called. The other one, I think they call it the reporter view, where it's like over the corner of the person. I think my personal favorite is the side-by-side view. I really like that kind of like squeeze in, make me portrait, and then put me next to next to that as well. I'm sure the next thing people are going to ask once we have these views is, well, can I put somebody else in the other corner? You know, and hopefully Microsoft is thinking ahead on those types of things, and maybe we'll be able to see more than one person on screen in those modes, because then you really, you know, that really takes away a lot of the need for an OBS or something like that. Because I don't know about you, but it takes probably 15% resource overhead for me to also run OBS. So I typically don't like to do that if I can get away with it.
Yeah, if you're running OBS and you're running a Teams meeting and you're presenting content like a PowerPoint with a really large video in it, it will eat up your resources. As I don't know if I hope the noise suppression is working really well because the fans are screaming right now. It still hasn't slowed down.
That's why you get a good microphone like what you have, so people can't hear that fan screaming. Another question. This is a really good one. Is can you change the lobby bypass after you start the meeting? The answer to that is yes, and Alex answered her saying yes, you can do that. That is in the meeting options. So whenever you go to the meatball menu, ... at the top of your meeting window, which I could bring on screen, Andy here.
Yeah, I got it right
up
there.
at the top, you can change all of these meeting options on the fly while you're in the meeting. So you'll go there to meeting options, and then you can adjust the lobby is those first three, the drop down plus the 2 radio buttons right there. So super handy to be able to flip that on and off to say like, okay, we're ready for people now. Go ahead and turn the lobby off, admit all, and then you can start your event. I think that's awesome.
That's also another feature as the lobby is building up. You get a list of the lobby attendees versus a list of like people that are already there in attendance. And so you get that clear separation between the two for being able to admit people to the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Stephen is saying he'd love to be able to prevent the attendee from changing the primary view. Now, with the presenter modes, that does lock that view for everybody. But you're right. I believe people still can go up to the view area and override that and say, I want together mode. And it will just, I think it moves the presenter mode down to the bottom corner, and then they get their together mode. It would be nice to be able to restrict that as well. I think I could see Microsoft not fully restricting that ever, because one of the modes is focus mode. And that's there for, cognitive accessibility reasons. Some people might be overwhelmed with seeing so much on screen, and they want to like get rid of the webcams and only see the stage. I could see Microsoft maybe not allowing you to actually force it so that you can't get to like at least focus mode, because like people might get overwhelmed. It might be too much stimulus to see that. But yeah, I agree. It'd be nice if you could, restrict some of that.
Don't forget, we also have, as an organizer, the Spotlight Me or Spotlight mode, where we can spotlight somebody as part of the presentation, and we can make that the main view. If anybody has cameras on, it moves them to the gallery, and the gallery is actually dynamic now. It's changing a little bit. It's traditionally been at the bottom of the window. Now the gallery is actually showing up off to the right-hand side, and as a user, when there's multiple video, you can also move it to the top. And that's really helpful for those of us that have webcams at the top. We can look at the people, and it looks like we're looking at the webcam and making eye contact versus looking down and seeing the top of everyone's head. But you do have the spotlight option that is present there. So you can spotlight yourself, or you can spotlight another presenter in the meeting, and that'll push that out to everyone.
Yeah, and Michelle's putting some looking eyes in the chat here, I think hinting at maybe some features to come or something like that. Being the Microsoft employee in the room, one thing that he mentions with more than one person on screen also is a question we got in the Ask the Experts during Ignite, which was, can I put more than one person on screen? And I figured that like the next thing is people are going to want presenter mode with more than one person. Something that is coming that's in the message center and the roadmap is the ability to spotlight more than one person. So Andy, you're showing the ability to spotlight me. I want to be forced for everybody. I believe it's set for June on the public roadmap, but you'll be able to spotlight up to 7 people as well. So you'll be able to select like, I want to throw 3 people on a spotlight, and that's my panelists, and then that is forced for everybody. So that is something that's coming here imminently. It's really close. So then Alex says that, together mode, that's only for that one person turning on together mode because they want to see it that way. It would be cool though, if you could like force that for other people. I'm curious. I wonder if that's coming because Microsoft announced at Build recently that you can build custom together modes using the developer platform. So if you turn on developer preview, I've been playing with this already with all kinds of like Magic School Bus and stuff like that. But you'll be able to create custom and branded, so maybe a company branded together mode screen. I wonder if like the end goal is maybe being able to force that on other people. One thing that is interesting with custom together modes is if you turn on together mode, this is getting like advanced live event production. But if you're doing a live event and you're doing like external encoding, so you're using NDI and you're pulling all your sources in through NDI to separate them out and rearrange them. If you, as the producer, if you turn on together mode, then together mode in NDI will be a source for you. There's active speaker, there's shared screen, and then that together mode. I think large gallery is one too if you get enough people. That would allow you then to pluck that out, put that into your encoder, whether it's like vMix or OBS Studio, and then now you've forced together mode on everybody. But then you're getting into like NDI and all that, which is pretty complex. It'd be nice just to have a button. So scanning for more questions here. Any word on when Spotlight will be captured in the meeting? Right now, I don't believe Spotlight is recorded. That's correct. Spotlight is not recorded. Flipping to together mode, the large gallery, even these presenter modes, which is really what's killing me. The presenter modes are not recorded in the Teams recording. I don't know if Microsoft has said when they plan to have it be like what was on stage is captured in the recording. I'm not sure when that might be coming. So my 3-year-old's here. Say hi. This is Finn for those that haven't met him yet. What, buddy? Yo, you spilled water in your brother's room? Awesome. That's great. My kids are at summer school right now, so we've been trying to lock him out of his brother and sister's room so he doesn't make a mess.
There's a follow-up question I want to bring up related to the recordings. How will the recordings work with webinars? Do we have the ability to do the recording inside of the webinars? Do we have the ability to block the download? And what's that going to look like for the webinar-based experience? There's a couple of things I just want to mention to that, and feel free to chime in with additional information. But just like a Teams meeting or a live event, we have the ability to record the webinar. So there are options that the end users can activate and they can turn on the recording of the webinar. But IT pros can also set up meeting policies around that and control the recording of the webinar. And that's going to fall in line with the other Microsoft 365 compliance and retention policies that you might have in place. But as you were mentioning a moment ago, not everything is actually recorded whenever you turn on that recording. I know one that's been a big ask is the whiteboard. When you go into your Teams meeting, webinar, whatever, and you go into whiteboard, whiteboard hasn't been recorded in the past. There's a workaround, and that's to use whiteboard on your desktop and then just record the desktop and you get it, but you don't get the whiteboard as part of that. I know that was on the roadmap for something that they were going to address and start recording as part of the meeting. But that's for like a technical training scenario. That one's huge, having the ability to whiteboard in the meeting from the share tray and get that as part of the recording. But like I'm in the webinar and I have the option to go ahead and start the recording because of the default meeting policies that are there. But as you were mentioning, some things are not going to be recorded. Like if I do the presenter mode with the me on top, like it's not going to record it like that for that version of the recording. But it will make the video available after anything that we record. That is recorded, it will make that available afterward, as you showed from one of your previous webinar testings earlier.
Yeah, and also along the recording stuff, just Teams meeting in general, there's a Teams meeting feature that applies to webinars, is that now that recording, even though it's automatically shared with the people who are in the meeting, who are in your organization, so your fellow employees, they get the recording automatically. They don't have the ability to download that recording anymore. So the block download option is rolling out right now. It started to be like the mid-May timeframe, but now that's automatically blocked for them. So they can watch it, but they can't download the recording. That was something I wanted to call out. That was roadmap ID 81390. Oh no, wait, that's breakout rooms. This was 70543 was the block download of recordings. I know that came up in the Ask the Experts back in the day. Then something that that Anna brought up here, I'm trying to find the chats here, is, yeah, speaking of branding, being able to brand live events and webinars to match corporate guidelines is important. One way, I know advanced comm SKU came up as well, is one thing that's part of that advanced comm SKU, or will be part of it, according to the Message Center, was the fact that you'll be able to roll out branded backgrounds. So you could like deliver backgrounds to people who have the advanced comm SKU in your organization, so that you could have like your creative services or your marketing department create these ones with the company logo on them and then roll them out to the desktop apps. That's going to be one of those advanced comm things as well.
Michelle was just mentioning it's in the chat window, and it kind of fits in with some of the roadmap stuff. This is from that webinar that he delivered a few weeks ago. I just wanted to pull this screen up so we could kind of see this. But this just shows some of the things that are GA now, as some of the things that are kind of rolling out now. Some of these we're already starting to see, and then some of the other roadmap items we can't discuss live. There's some cool stuff actually coming. I wanted to just briefly pull this one down. I think most of this has already hit your tenant, John. There's a few things here that have not hit mine yet, like the dedicated attendee tab up at the top. I haven't seen that, but the presenter layout mode, that one's actually there. The registration and email, some of the host controls, that's been already rolled out there as well. And then just to kind of go back on. You were just mentioning some of the capabilities based off of the SKU. I just wanted to pull this up. This is also from that same webinar, and this has been broadcast in a bunch of different places. This screenshot just did it real justice. The webinar capabilities. This was a big question at Ignite. It's continued to be a big question. Like, what SKU do I need? Like, or do I have to buy the advanced broadcast capabilities? Like, what do I need in order to be able to work with this? And this just shows that the webinar capabilities are included out of box with like your enterprise E3, E5, your A3, A5, and then a couple of the business plans as well. Now, I know there's probably going to be like some one-off questions about, I have this particular SKU and, I have, these users on that SKU. That's one that gets a little bit more technical, but, core capabilities are available with the SKUs listed here.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one to call out too, that business standard and premium, the only difference there is that limit. Like if you're in the education or the enterprise level, you have that 1,000-person meeting. With business licenses, it's a 300-person meeting, and then you get that overflow after that point. Yeah. So that's helpful. One quick question that we had from the Ask the Experts, Andy, was what about channel meetings? Can you have registration in a channel-based meeting? I don't know if you've run into that question yet out in the wild.
I have ran into that question a few times, and I'm just going to go and I'll just demo this for you. For those of you live, all right, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to schedule a meeting inside of here. And so I'm in here, and registration, it gives me the drop-down option. So let's switch it over to people in the org. And then to require people to register, you need to remove the channel from the meeting invite. So they're not supported inside of a channel meeting, which also leads to another nuance of meetings and teams that you need to be aware of, and that these webinars are tied very much to the meeting experience that's associated with chat. So like you have your meetings over here. So like here's my meeting. I'm in chat on the left nav rail. This is the chat associated with that webinar demo. So my chat's going to be associated. The webinar chat's going to be associated with chat. Files, though, are going to be associated with OneDrive, because if it's associated with chat, then the files are actually going to be stored in OneDrive. So if I share any files as part of the webinar, that's going to be in my OneDrive for Business folder. And that also leads to the recording. The recording file is also going to be in your OneDrive folder for meeting recordings. So that's something to make sure that users are clear on, but also that your IT pros are clear on. OneDrive is a critical part of the Microsoft 365 user experience, and I think a lot of users that I've worked with over the years have kind of overlooked how critical OneDrive really is to that experience, and they don't utilize it, or they turn off certain things, or but there was a big shift with where meeting recordings were stored. They were stored directly in Stream, and now Stream is being kind of integrated with OneDrive and SharePoint. So those meeting recordings and files, they're going to be associated with that particular user's OneDrive. If those are files that you want to make available after the meeting is over, you might want to put them in like a SharePoint site, because with a user, when they leave the organization, typically there's a 30-day window, and then those files are destroyed when the account's shut down and you don't have access to that anymore. I've ran into that numerous times over the last few years, where someone puts critical files in a OneDrive and then leaves the organization and people don't have access to it. So if the files you share in the webinar and the recording are important, you might want to surface those through SharePoint and SharePoint sites. So as roles come and go and roles change, that content lives on for the next iteration of your team. But short answer to your question, no, you can't do a webinar in a channel, and it is tied to chat, and then it is tied to that OneDrive experience.
Yeah. I was just answering a comment in chat about like externals are being allowed to register. Is that coming? Yeah, that's here available now. At the beginning of this, if you go back to the beginning, I brought up PowerShell and showed basically there's an attribute for who can register. You need to set that to everyone, and then anybody in the world would be able to register, or it allows the option. So you can click don't require registration, everyone, which is public, open to the world, or everyone in my organization. That's locked down to just your org. So I wanted to call that out. Other quick questions that we had from the Ask the Experts is we got channel meetings out of the way. Breakout rooms is kind of a twofold question I've gotten, which is, are breakout rooms available in webinars? The answer to that is yes. So you can create breakout rooms because it's just a meeting. The other thing is, what about pre-creation of breakout rooms? And I wanted to call out that this is coming, the ability to like create, you make your meeting and then you go create your breakout rooms before the meeting starts. That is coming in July. It's on the public roadmap. 81390 is the roadmap ID for that one. With that, you'll be able to create, I don't know what it's going to look like. I haven't seen like a manifestation of what it's going to look like. Maybe it'll be like a meeting app, kind of like the meeting polls. But they do say that, sometime next month we'll be able to make them early. And Andy's showing on screen here. I'm going to make this bigger. Andy's showing on screen some of the new features that we got in breakout rooms. The one I'm most excited about is that time limit right there at the bottom.
Yeah, that was a recent addition, to be able to set a duration, hours and minutes for the breakout room while users are in there. And it is a little bit simpler now to move users between the different breakout rooms. So like when I start adding in, assigning people, moving them between the breakout rooms is a little bit easier with that. But there's been a number of announcements to the breakout room functionality and some of what they're doing there. So there's some really exciting stuff on the roadmap related to that. But yeah, you can use breakout rooms as part of the webinar experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question here came up from Alex is the I think the cameras and microphones were off by default, but in the demo today it wasn't the case. I want to say, I'm racking my brain. I want to say in my usage it's been that the camera and microphones are set to no, they're set to off by default. I think that's what happened in your meeting, Andy. For mine that I showed on screen earlier, I turned those features on because it's an internal class and I want people to be able to talk. But as I mentioned, I had 250 people sign up for my webinar, so I think I'm going to go turn that back off. again. In my OneDrive classes last month, I had them turned to off, but only like 30 people showed up. So it was kind of awkward that I didn't have verbal communication back and forth. So I just turned it on using what Andy's showing right here. I went to meeting options, flipped the feature on, and then it was like, hey, you guys can unmute and ask questions, because it was a weird power dynamic with so few people.
The default policy here, because I haven't changed anything in the administrative settings in this tenant, the default was the allow mic for attendees and camera. Those were both set to yes. Yeah. So that does allow them to go ahead and activate that. And then I have the option as the meeting organizer before or during the meeting to toggle that to no if I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the only other question I have from the Ask the Expert section at Ignite was, what about a producer role? Is there an idea of a producer in a live event? How does that work? I think we covered that fairly well, that there's not a separate producer. You've got presenters and you've got attendees. You also have organizers as well. The organizer role, though, that's the only person who can create breakout rooms, for instance, as well as control some other meeting options. But I did want to call out that I did some research, and co-organizers is on the public roadmap, and that's roadmap 81391. That is coming in September. So that's really exciting news, that to find that on the roadmap, that finally we're going to have a co-organizer role, so that if somebody books meetings for someone else, they'll be able to make that person an organizer. They'll have all the same rights as if they had organized it themselves. Really helpful for like executive admins and people like that.
Speaking of that, that producer role, one of the big questions that I got at Ignite, but also that I continue to get, is like, what's the difference between like a webinar and a live event? Like, why would I choose to do a webinar versus like a live event? This is from Michelle's Teams Nation, and I just thought the slide was awesome. I took a screenshot of it, but this is just easier to pull it up here. It gives a breakdown between the two types of events, a Teams meeting versus a live event. And remember, there's a lot of overlap right now with Teams meetings and webinars and features there. And then it just does the comparison here with the live events and like some of the things that you're going to get. And just to point out a few of the things on here, the Q&A is actually, according to the Q&A is actually scheduled to start rolling out for the Teams meeting / webinars at some point in the near future. That's one of the things that the live events have, is that it has that Q&A feature. That's one of the we talked about this a few minutes ago. One of the things that we really want. So there's the Q&A feature. Registration right now is only for like a webinar based scenario or a Teams meeting. We don't get that for the live event option. And then there's some of the additional features like the attendee reporting and the engagement dashboard. Like, we see that as part of the webinar based scenario, but not necessarily in the Teams live events. The custom layouts or some of the like the presenter over the presenter mode with the presenter over on top of the content, that's right now only for the meetings and live events. And I just thought that this chart was kind of helpful to kind of give you the comparison. The live events are great, but they do have that presenter, producer, and organizer role. And then there's also, like, when you get into the live event, there's the production of it. So you have to queue up the material that's going to go next. You have to send it live. You have to start live. There's a 30-minute or 30-second delay between what goes live versus like what, users are actually seeing. And so like, you might be 2 minutes down the road before somebody asks a question in the Q&A. So it's kind of hard to answer questions in real time there. And usually when I'm delivering like a technical training, I'm a one-stop shop production team of one. So I'm delivering and I'm presenting at the same time. And that gets really tricky in a Teams live event. Sometimes it takes 2 user roles to actually do that. And that means you have to have somebody logged in as the organizer of the live event. And then you have to have someone logged in as the presenter. And that just it's a lot of overhead. This simplifies a lot of that from the production standpoint, But I believe I saw some things on the dashboard about the roles for presenters and organizers, having some co-organizer capabilities and some co-presenter capabilities in the webinars, and just simplifying some of what we would do versus a live event scenario. That being said, live events definitely have their place in our broadcast. It's great for when the CEO needs to have like a town hall and get everybody involved, because we can broadcast that in so many different locations. We can minimize interaction, keep it through a curated Q&A. That's a great use case for it. But for like a technical training event, it's a lot of overhead for me to deliver a live event versus like a Teams meeting. And this webinar is going to fit right in the middle. And when I get things like a Q&A panel, and I can work with the attendee dashboard, and I can work with the registration, that's just going to take it to the next level for me without having to deal with that high level of maintenance and overhead.
Yeah. I put the link to Michelle's what do you call it? Conference session. That's the word I'm thinking of. It's going to be lunchtime. My blood sugar is getting low. His conference session at Teams Nation, I put the link in the chat for that. I'll also put that one, Tracy's video about preload screens, and Steven's video about the list and Power Automate. I'll put those 3 links in the description for this video as well, so that you folks have those. So, did you have any other questions that you saw in the Ask the Experts or in the chat, Andy? I'm curious, can you check? This is a Restream question. Are you able to click any of these comments to show them on screen, or am I the only one allowed to do that?
I think you're the only one that can add the comments to the screen. I'm not seeing that option.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was curious about that. Again, this is my first time using Restream for this Restream Studio, and I really like it. It's been an awesome experience, but
it's gone really smoothly.
Like that I didn't know.
Yeah, it's gone really smoothly.
I love being able to just like turn your screen off, and now it's just the 2 of us side by side, and I can swap screens. Oh my gosh, that's pretty cool.
There is one from the Ask the Experts, and it's when will I know when the Teams webinar feature is available inside of my my tenant? If you're like many of us, you were basically checking on the Teams calendar every day for this drop down right up here. That's basically when you knew it was going to, or when it was actually live. I saw it. It was live, and then it would disappear like in the same day, and then it would go live, and then it would disappear again. And like this went on for me for a couple of weeks. Again, this tenant just set the public preview, so it's like it was a start and stop. As far as the specific version of Teams that you need, and whether you're like just public cloud, or whether you're like GCC, or another version of that, the way that I found out, just basically go in, check for the webinar drop down, and when I saw that, that's when I knew it was live. And we tested it on a couple other user accounts, and that's when we knew it was actually starting to roll out. So that was one that I got quite a bit, that's when I knew it was there. Yeah,
and Alex says for him, he still doesn't have the drop down, but he does have the registration option. That's what my users experienced. Is I was saying, hey, watch for the drop down, and I think a day before they got it in the drop down, I had somebody who runs most of our webinars at Cerner. She was all excited. She's like, I have it in new meeting only. And that's the same difference. It converts it into a webinar.
Yeah.
But that might, Alex, mean that it's imminent. Maybe in the next day or so, you might get it. At least what we noticed in production for us. And then it's a little bit tricky too, because you may never get that drop down if your IT administrators have disabled the allow meeting registration option in PowerShell. If they proactively turned off webinars, then you won't get the drop down, even though your tenant has it. So,
and this is kind of a follow-up to that same question. We have the ability to schedule Teams meetings from Outlook. And so I've had questions already, like, can I schedule a webinar directly from Outlook? And there's pros and cons to scheduling from Outlook versus scheduling inside of Teams. But this is the default option that I have in Outlook for this particular user. And I'm in Outlook in the web, and it's just giving me the option for just a Teams meeting there. Try to pop it out to, separate windows, see any other options. And it's just giving me the Teams meeting. So it's not giving me the webinar feature inside of for this particular user inside of Outlook. So it is pretty much the calendar inside of Teams where I'm going to see that option show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then she says, speaking of Teams live events, it'd be really nice to have multiple content sources. I was talking about that with Restream, how it's nice that both of us are sharing our screen right now, and I'm able just to bring mine up and then bring yours up, separately. That's pretty nice. I agree. I would love to be able to do that. Back at the beginning of Teams live events for like the first couple months, it was like 2.5, almost 3 years ago now, you used to be able to have both in there and then you could switch between content, but then it went away like right away after that. And we haven't seen that since. So
a smoother production role. Like I like live events to a certain extent, but to do some of the things like smoother producing experience, OBS is actually really good for that. And then you just feed it in as a single camera. One of the things like John mentioned earlier is like NDI. Teams actually can output to NDI, which is really cool. And when you're in that meeting, and the video is coming through. Let me go to this meeting. I'll see if I can actually show the option. But let me just go in. I might not have the setting turned on, but it shows up. There's a NDI option that shows up down at the bottom. And whenever we enable that option, every camera feed that comes through actually shows up as a separate feed, and then you can feed that into something like OBS. And so OBS has that producer role, but you can also deal with multiple pieces of content in there, and then you can queue it up and cut over. And if you just output the OBS virtual stream back into your Teams presentation, you can use that as a secondary layer. It's extra. It's an extra program. It's free, but you got to learn it. And so they do recognize some of those capabilities with that. But I just wanted to mention that as a follow-up to that question. Yeah, I need to just turn on the NDI network interface there.
Yeah, the switch for it.
Let me just end this and go back into it. So we'll go back into the meeting. All right, and then I would go in and then start broadcast over NDI. And so when I turn that on, then I can go into my NDI tool, and every video stream coming in, whether it's me or whether it's John or whoever else is joining in, it separates each one of those into an individual NDI output. And for those of you that don't know, NDI stands for Network Device Interface. It runs on your local network. It's a high quality video signal that runs on your local network. And through a tool like OBS, you can consolidate that into a single stream, and you can do like a split screen view. So like John's doing here in Restream, there's me, there's John, there's my desktop. That's technically 3 video streams, but it's overlaid really nicely in the Restream tool. We're using like an OBS or a Restream. We can make that a camera and then input that back into Teams, and then we can get a smoother live event presentation versus, the limitations that are there. But I got to use that other tool, NDI and OBS. To do that.
Yeah.
And like
one nice thing about NDI for that is that you've got those like variables. I call them like variable sources. One of those is active speaker. Somebody way up in the chat was saying like, it'd be really nice to have it auto swap the person that's in that side-by-side view. You can do that if you do OBS. You would set the NDI source to be active speaker, then put it side by side with the content, push that back through as a virtual camera, spotlight it, and then you get that auto switching of presenters. But again, yeah, like you said, it's a separate app,
Yeah, it's just another level to maintain on that.
Yeah. And then Dwayne was asking, like, hey, like, do you need integration with Dynamics, or can you follow up with attendees some other way? I haven't seen publicly about like if there's coming like to push it into like Salesforce or some other type of like third-party integration. But as Alex mentioned in the chat, you don't need Dynamics in order to do the engagement report. You turn on the allow attendee engagement I think is what the attribute is called. In PowerShell, you turn on allow attendee engagement, and then you get that tab now. The tab just showed up for me yesterday, I believe, in my test tenant for the attendance tab, and that gives you that engagement. I've seen screenshots from Microsoft and their marketing, announcements and their blog posts that like attendee engagement is part of that. And they're going to have like graphs that show like who the most engaged people were, how many thumbs up and hearts and reactions did you get. But right now for me, I just get like, here's the list of people. Did they register? Did they attend? How long did they attend? And then what questions, like what was their answer to the custom questions on the form? I'm looking forward to the engagement part of that because we have the attendee list. I want to see the like sentiment analysis and stuff like that.
I'm really interested in the dynamics portion of it because I want to see the CRM capabilities. You a lot of times, like, you deliver a public webinar, you deliver it for free, but you want to be able to capture those leads and then follow up on it later, maybe in a sales opportunity. And that's going to be a big ask for getting people to switch away from some of the other webinar-based tools that they might use, because they do get some of that information that they can use for a sales funnel down the road. And I think that was some of the vision of Microsoft when they announced this back at Ignite, is to have some of that CRM capability. I know I'm particularly interested in that, so I'm looking forward to exploring that when we start to see more of it roll out.
Yeah, my company won't be using that. We do something else rather than Dynamics. But to show another video, I'll put this in the chat. But Lisa Crosby, a fellow MVP with us, she, I think that went into the chat. Let me paste that in. There we go. She's got an awesome video out there that was a wrap up of the Ignite announcements regarding Dynamics 365, and she goes into detail showing the webinar integrations. And then I think they talked about it at Build as well, where they're like, hey, here's what it looks like to tie the webinar to Dynamics 365 marketing. I know nothing about Dynamics because we don't use it internally, but she is a great resource to follow. That's Lisa Crosby. I would definitely check her channel out too.
Yeah, there's another question or another follow-up in the chat window kind of related to this topic. Alex says, good point about some of the other webinar options are pretty expensive. Michelle actually broke that down in that video that they had. There was actually specific kind of breakdown where they're comparing the non-Teams video webinar tools to some of the Microsoft stuff. This is strictly from like included with your license point of view. So like, I'm paraphrasing what was said in that particular presentation, but it just shows like if the user is using a Microsoft 365 E3 license, this is what it's going to cost you per month versus some of the other tools that are out there. And I can tell you from experience, some of the tools that we're using from competitors to deliver the webinar, not even necessarily the CRM capabilities, but just to deliver the webinar, depending on the number of participants and the size of the audience and the engagement, like it can escalate very, very quickly. And you're getting a pretty cost-effective method out of box with some of the Microsoft capabilities. Now, do you get the full experience that some of those other platforms have? Not yet, but remember, this is very much a tool that is in the process of rolling out and maturing, and it's going to mature as feedback's provided, new features are going to be released. So it's just going to take a little bit of time. Is it a replacement for some of those tools today, especially for like professional marketing-based scenarios? Not 100%, but that's something that, give it time, and I think it's going to mature into a scenario where it can be a viable replacement for some of those other tools and applications.
Yeah, I'm pumped to see where this heads in the next like 6 months or so.
Yeah,
I think we're going to see a lot. I would anticipate that hopefully we'll see a lot of polish and a lot of kind of maybe like a V2 for webinars, maybe around, keep in mind that Microsoft's fiscal year starts on July 1st. So I would maybe like keep an eye out for a July 1st, maybe a blog post announcement. Last year, Jared Sperato posted a big Microsoft blog on July 1st that was, hey, beginning of fiscal year, here's what we're doing with Teams meetings. And my goodness, like if you go look at that from July 1st to now, like it was like we were living in the dark ages with Microsoft Teams, with all the stuff that has come out since then. It's incredible. So I'm hoping that we'll get like, okay, we've caught up in a lot of ways of like what people have been asking us to do, but here's what we're doing next fiscal year. And it's going to be just like insane stuff that we're not even dreaming of yet. And then the other time that I would look at is July 1st. And then keep in mind that Fall Ignite is coming as well. I believe that's usually in the September timeframe, but we'll probably see announcements at those 2 points throughout the rest of this year. And I would venture to guess that webinars is already pretty popular, and maybe they'll share some numbers about adoption or something like that. But I think we'll see some improvements that are, it'll be worth the wait, I hope.
And just from experience, I know a lot of you are tuning in to learn about webinars and some of the ins and outs and get some of these technical questions that have been asked answered. But just from experience, I can tell you, like, keep your eye on the roadmap, but also focus on what's there now. Like, some of you haven't quite seen the webinar capabilities roll out in your tenant yet. We're showing some things here today. John's seen some things that I haven't seen in my tenant yet. So just focus on what you have now. Keep your eye on the roadmap, but don't count on the roadmap, because things are going to change. States are going to be in flux. Features are going to be in change. Don't bank on a certain feature being released at a particular time, and then maybe cancel a service and put yourself in a bind. I can tell you that I've seen that happen, where, hey, this is coming. All right, we're going to turn off this service now. And, for a couple of months, there was a lot of pain while we dealt with the transition. So take advantage of what you have now. The roadmap definitely is going to help. These announcements, at the beginning of the fiscal year and, Ignite, that tells you what's coming, to inspire you, to let you know what the product's going to be capable of. But definitely when you start to roll this out to your users, roll it out based off of what you have capable at the time. And then as the other features start to go live, then you can start to announce some of those other features and add to what the product delivers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know I've been caught that way several times, where it's like, Microsoft says this is coming, and then it gets delayed, and you make decisions based off of things that you see that are like on a roadmap, or especially like in the message center. It's like, oh, it's real now if it's in the message center. Even that, a lot of advice as of late is wait until you actually put your hands on the button before you assume when it's going to get here.
And even then, the button might disappear in the same day.
That's true. You dealt with weeks of it disappearing for you.
Yeah, the big feature that they got pushed back that a lot of people really wanted was breakout rooms, but they needed time to get that experience right. So it was announced I believe maybe spring of last year, and it got pushed back a few times, and I don't think it actually went live until November. But it's been stable since it went live
before school started.
Yeah,
and I think they focused on EDU and then got it into the enterprise and corporate environments.
Yeah,
I think it was December for us that we saw breakout rooms. And it was one of those things. It's like, yeah, we've got another solution. If we could just get breakout rooms, we could get more users off of that over to Teams, and just kind of stair step your way to where you want to be.
Yep.
Yeah, Dwayne says dynamic view. That's another one that popped in my mind. Dwayne was dynamic view. I think it went out to public preview and then got pulled back. And then we've seen that with the setting, the hamburger menu or the meatball menu for settings.
Meatball menu.
That rolled out. We announced it on Yammer to 30,000 people. Oh my gosh, the settings moved. Isn't this great? It's split apart. And then the next day it reverted back, and people were asking about it. And then when it came out for real, 2 weeks later, everybody didn't care anymore. So
I have to track down who coined the phrase meatball menu to make sure I can give them credit for that. But I picked that up recently and I really like it.
Yeah, that's a funny one. All right, cool. Well, I think I'm gonna get off of here and grab some lunch pretty soon. I
Yeah,
don't
I
see any
think
more
we
chat
covered
scrolling through, but
a good bit. This has been a lot of fun.
yeah, this was a great time. This video is going to be available on demand. So after this is over, after I click the end stream button, it'll be available. I'm going to leave it on my channel, and then I will. I'll keep an eye on the questions also in the chat and the comments. So it'll turn into comments. Leave a comment if you're watching this on demand, and let us know if you have any other questions. We're happy to do that. And then I wanted to leave us with, where do we find these guys? This is Andy's Twitter account. So Andy Huneycutt. It's Huney is how
I'm
it's
one of the
spelled.
weird
So a lot of
ones.
people do HO. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to call that out, but follow Andy. He posts a lot of awesome stuff out there. And then my Twitter handle is John_Moore. Not very exciting, but yeah, that's where you can find us and ask us questions. Anything you want to know about webinars or anything else Office 365 related, we'll certainly at least help you track down the answer. That being said, thanks for watching. Thanks, Andy, for hanging out with me. It's a lot less awkward when I have somebody to talk to.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I hope you guys are, continue to stay safe. Things are getting a little bit better in the U.S., but everybody watching around the world, stay safe, and can't wait to see folks in person again soon. So take care and have a great day. Bye, everybody.